Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. My name is Ashley Giordano. I'm senior editor at Overland Journal and Expedition Portal. And today we are at Overland Expo West in Flagstaff, Arizona, in the Black Series podcast studio with two special guests, Ernesto and Thais of Overland, the Americas. Welcome, guys. I'm so excited to have a great chat with you today.
Thank you. Hi, Ashley.
So you guys have an amazing story. You drove from Seattle all the way down the Pan American Highway to South America and really dove into some unique countries down there that don't necessarily get hit as often by overlanders. Give me a little rundown on your trip.
And a special thanks to Frontrunner for supporting this week's podcast. Looking for adventure at a moment's notice? Introducing the new Slim Sport Roof Rack from Frontrunner. A low-profile, sleek alternative that's perfect for hauling sports equipment one day and driving the streets the next. Whether the day in the wild calls for camping, mountain bikes, ski gear, paddleboard, or just a few storage bags, the Slim Sport makes it easier to get there. Here's some key Slim Sport features. It's got a low-profile design to minimize drag noise and allow for easier access to low clearance garages. It has T-slots in the high strength aluminum slats that allow you to use most of Frontrunner's top mount accessories. Side mount accessories are accommodated through available rack mounting brackets. It's also got the ability to add any of Frontrunner's 55 plus accessories to the Slim Sport so you can set up your rack for any adventure. Choosing your next adventure has never been easier with the new Slim Sport Roof Rack. Slim Sport is available for select vehicle models. Visit frontrunneroutfitters.com to learn more.
Yes, in 2015, Thais and I embarked on this trip from Seattle, Washington to the tip of the continent, made it all the way down to Ushuaia. And our goal was really to try to travel all 23 contiguous countries in the Americas, which includes those three countries that you're talking about, three nations really, French Guiana, Suriname, and Guyana. It also includes my home country where I was born, Venezuela, which is kind of difficult to travel for a lot of people right now.
And we really enjoyed Brazil. Not everyone has a chance to kind of tackle Brazil, but we highly recommend it.
It's a big country too. What were your favorite parts?
I think that people, not parts, more people. Brazil, they're really charming. What's really charming about Brazil? We kind of gravitate around the mountains, and Brazil is not a country that is known for tall mountains. Still very beautiful. There are areas where you can find some beautiful canyons, like it sort of resembles Utah, a little bit more lush with some of the vegetation, but like sort of like deserty type landscapes. But people really, I think this is what impacted us the most. All from the south to the very north of the country where like it gets very rural, people were always charming.
Awesome. So I want to go back in time a little bit because there's like quite a lead up to this trip that I think is really important and interesting. And I want to go back to your time in Venezuela and how you two met, because Thais is from the US, so you're from Venezuela. Share the story, if you wish, about how you met.
I'll take it away. And of course, Ernesto, feel free to jump in because we have two different stories. But
Two different versions.
But I studied abroad in Venezuela my junior year of college. I lived with a Venezuelan family and I was studying Spanish was my minor and geography is my major. And I got to do some awesome classes of botany of the Andes in Spanish. So it was a great opportunity for me to really learn a ton, experience the culture by living with a family. And in the evenings, I might have gone out every single night with fellow other Americans, students. I met Ernesto at a bar. And I was studying Spanish and he was studying English and the rest was history. There's more in there. Yeah, I guess it's one of those moments where I got super lucky that I got to meet Ernesto that night. I was almost not going to go out that night. I took a yoga class and I was like, I'm going to go home tonight and not go to the bar. But then I saw my friend and got to meet him.
Where was this in Venezuela?
In the Andes, in a beautiful university town called Mérida, Venezuela.
So there's a second version to this story?
Yeah, and I will even go a little bit further back. The reason why I was in that city is I experienced a life-changing event. I had a terrible car accident that really changed the direction of my plans and what I was doing. So I was doing architecture school. After the accident, I fell behind. I spent 6 months recovering. And my dad, after that, was like pretty adamant. It's like making sure that I made up for the time that I had lost. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to travel to the US, transfer my credits from architecture school. And one of the first steps was moving to the city, Merida, where I had a condo that was under our names, my sister and I, with the intention of selling it to be able to pay for college. So I was there, focused on doing that, studying in English.
Not going out every night.
Not going out every night for once. A friend of mine from college showed up on my door. He had broke up with his girlfriend and he needed some emotional support. And I really didn't know what to do. So I just said, okay, let's go to a bar. That's where Thaisa and her friend Shelly were. And that was the beginning of our 20+ year relationship.
And Ernesto said to me that first night, oh, I really want to move to the States, specifically Seattle, to study graphic design. I also love the music scene. And I was like, cool, I'm from Jersey. I'd never been to the West Coast. And who knew that I was then, not that much longer later, like I guess 6 months later after I graduated, I ended up following Ernesto because he got into graphic design school in Seattle. And then again, that was history from there.
I was going to ask you, because you obviously would have finished up your program in Venezuela and gone back to the US, and how you reunited in the US. Did you keep in contact during that time? Or
as Thaisa said, my plans were to go to Seattle. I had done some research, again, mountain lover, hiking. I also asked about English, accents and how big the Hispanic community was. I actually was pursuing, the opposite, a place where there weren't too many Hispanic people for me to be able to learn English a little bit faster. I loved the idea of like having Canada right there, the mountains. Always calling. And the music scene for sure was a big influence. I grew up 90s, Generation X. I loved all the grunge scene. And
I joke that like I moved to Seattle because of Pearl Jam. In the end, it's true, / Ernesto.
A little bit.
That's awesome. So you guys spent some time in Venezuela. Obviously you spent a lot of time there because you grew up there, but did that overlanding culture that's so prevalent there, did that have any influence over what you ended up doing later in your life? Or did something else kind of spark when you were in the US?
That's a great question. I think subconsciously, yeah. I think that it was so ingrained in normal. 4x4s in Venezuela are like so common and have been for generations. Like even when my dad was in college, his first truck was a 55 series, an Iron Pig, and I was a toddler, right? My dad was in college doing environmental engineering. He had founded this search and rescue team, and they got donated this truck. And as a kid, I was just like remember vaguely, just like standing up in that like bench seat, which is on the truck, and going up to the mountains and camping, and even smaller, I was like in my dad's backpack while he was fishing. There's tons of photos, like this little guy in the back of his backpack. So nature, I think it would be, the first influence. I grew up around trucks. I never thought anything of it, never thought of anything special about Land Cruisers and like this stuff. But a lot of my friends in high school had trucks, and back in the 90s, they had rooftop tents, and they travel across the country to go to an area of the country called La Gran Sabana, where there is very little infrastructure. It's a massive national park. It's gorgeous. So I think that was kind of like the first time of like the car camping.
Isn't that wild? I think overlanding kind of picked up in North America way after that, in terms of like, the first time we've all seen a rooftop tent, but actually it was going on in Venezuela, like you said, so much earlier than that. Yeah. So cool.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't even called overlanding, right?
Right.
People was just like, let's do a road trip and just go camping.
That's great. So interesting. I think sometimes we don't necessarily know the history of overlanding in other countries going back that far and further. So it's pretty cool to hear about different experiences that different people had sleeping in rooftop tents before they came over to the States and to Canada.
And the 4x4 culture was so big. That's what most people refer to as like 4x4 races. There was a race that was very, very well funded. The logistics of it were impressive. In fact, it was called a Fun Race. You can still go on YouTube and check them out. Chopper support.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I would go and say that probably Australia, Malaysia, and Venezuela, that 4x4 culture and competitions. I wasn't aware of that, but I later became aware of how prevalent that was.
So you guys got together. you're in Seattle, you're working, you went to school for graphic design. I'm trying to get an idea of like, what was your life like before you made this big decision to go on this great adventure?
So Ernesto finished graphic design school and got a great job in Seattle. I decided to go to California to pursue my graduate studies in international environmental policy. And then I came back and got a job working for the state doing just that. Ernesto was working graphic design jobs, just paying stuff off, applying what we've learned, but then feeling kind of unfulfilled.
Yeah, I was wondering what that moment was when you realized that this was something that you wanted to do and who that came from. Was it both of you? Yeah. How did that happen?
I'll go a little bit back again. So
Yes.
as a kid, I had these, I was always drawn to like world culture. I don't think that I was a weird kid, but maybe I was. I started collecting stamps and paper currency and coins. And I was always fascinated by like the images like shown in these, like who is this queen? Where is this landscape? What does this mean? I don't understand what this language is. And just as music, I was something no one really it was like something very natural. But as a kid, you just travel with your parents. When I made it to college, I made it a point to travel overseas at least once a year, being in Venezuela. And when I moved to the United States to go to school, that actually happened. I was traveling abroad, but really what I was doing was just like visiting back home. And my mother lives in Italy, so I would just kind of do 1 year in Venezuela, in South America, 1 year in Europe, and just start like traveling a little bit more here and there. 2 weeks didn't feel that it was enough, and starting to look at I like this thing. I want to keep traveling.
And after I studied abroad in Venezuela, I always knew that I wanted to see more of South America. And I studied geography, and I was always interested in like the intersect between people and place. So I think in my heart, I always knew I wanted to travel the world, and definitely Central and South America more. I just loved the culture and the language. So we kind of knew that we wanted to do that, but felt like, well, we got these degrees and now it's time to like pay those off and also like work, right? But then, it quickly changed into like 7 years at that same job. And we wanted more. We wanted to see the world.
I did quite a bit of backpacking in Europe when I went to visit my family. And, kind of every year we're reminded of how good it felt just to experience something different. I kind of craved and was waiting for that to accrue those 2 or 3 weeks of vacation just to go and travel overseas. And then I thought, weirdly enough, somehow like this drawn to South America and Venezuela, I feel that I don't know my culture well enough. Something that started happening. But then you look at Latin America or South America and it's massive. It's huge. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? The infrastructure is not that such as Europe. It's not as easy. I mean, it's doable, but I wanted to kind of like get deeper into it. Like, okay, I don't want to do just like the sightseeing in the cities. How can we travel and get a little bit more remote?
And then Ernesto was the one who pitched the idea, and he'll tell you, I think in a moment, who inspired him. And when he pitched it to me, I thought, long road trip, I have backpacking experience and hiking experience. And I don't know, the thought of car camping or like a long road trip wasn't that appealing to me because, I don't know, like family road trips, not the best. But then I realized that way of travel was going to provide much more freedom to do that hiking and backpacking. So I'll let Ernesto take it away from here.
Yeah, I think it was this seed of like, is it possible to actually drive all the way down? There's something called the Pan American Highway. I mean, is that real? How feasible is it? So we started kind of like putting together back in the day. We're talking, I mean, it took us forever to leave. So we are maybe in 2008. When we started fiddling with the whole idea.
And you had actually a coworker. This is so cool. I love this story so much because you're at work and it was like a coworker that suggested this to you. So you're like at your place of work is where you got the idea to like leave work.
Yes.
Which is fun.
Exactly. So we were like definitely uncertain that such thing could be done because you will look online in terms like overlanding or like, from the US to South America. I mean, nothing really kind of connected. Yes, you can travel to Mexico. And then I sort of like put it together. So like, okay, if I start looking at capitals, they have to be connected in a way to the rest of the country and to borders, right? So I started thinking more and more about it. And I started sharing with coworkers and family, like very early on. They got very tired about, hearing this thing. It's like, come on already. But one of my coworkers mentioned that in the 70s, which I thought was very interesting because like Central America was going through unrest, Colombia, Peru, and even Chile, where they were from. You know, it wasn't all rosy back then. She traveled as a very young kid with their parents in a Volkswagen Beetle all the way to Chile. That was the moment. I thought if they did it then in a Volkswagen Beetle, it can be done now.
Wait, and how many people in that Volkswagen again? Because that was the crazy part, I thought.
Parents and 3 siblings.
Incredible.
I couldn't believe it, but like she started just kind of elaborating on like the things that she vaguely remember being so little.
Hardcore.
Yeah. Epic trip. So you had this idea that this was possible.
And got more into, okay, let's piece it together because you're not going to enter it in Google Maps. There weren't like many books or resources online where you can actually find that info. There were some, but you really had to dig. What we started doing was like, hey, what would it take to travel from Tijuana to Mexico City? And then from there to the biggest or settlement in Guatemala and so on, right? So that way, we were able to kind of start like piecing it together. I mean, really had no idea. It was like, where are the ruins that everybody talks about? You know, it's definitely not lined up with that, you know, route. It eventually came all together.
So vehicle-wise, how did you decide what you were going to drive?
That was a process. We had a lot of time to think about that as well. Now I think that it's a no-brainer. I'm super biased. But like,
it's easier now.
It's easier now. But back in the day, I think the first reference was van life, the Vanagons, and like being able to be self-contained and have your kitchen and be able to sleep in the car. I started researching that a little bit more. Even back then, like the prices in the West Coast for a Vanagon, one in good shape, 20 years old, was like $30,000, and was like, that's very expensive. And heard stories from other travelers like Natural Drive, and you know, like the endless situations that they found themselves in, like swapping engines, you know, in different continents, and like having to wait for weeks. And we even became close friends with the Vanagon Club up in Washington. Super tight group of friends up there. And every time that we went out with them, someone broke down. So it was like, maybe not the Vanagon. So I started looking at, you know, the usual suspects, Land Rovers, Land Cruisers. At the time, we didn't have, I say this, but like, you know, we didn't have the financial means to buy a Land Cruiser. So we started looking at older ones. And then I thought something interesting was going on in Venezuela, where like you could bring a vehicle in and then like pretty much profit from it, like quite a bit. Just a very volatile situation with the currency exchange that was going on at the time. I said, well, maybe we just get a new vehicle. I'm not very mechanically inclined, so that was appealing to me. Just get a car where, like, you know, we're not going to encounter that many issues, and ended up going with a 4Runner Trail Edition at the time. In 2012, it had like rear lockers, and it seemed like the right idea. We went for it.
One of the other stories that I love was that you went around to a bunch of mechanics in the area and asked them which vehicles broke down or which ones they worked on the least. I thought that was genius. Yes. Like a little bit of investigation, and what they obviously said some sort of Toyota.
Yes, and that's a fun story because
almost bought a Land Rover.
We all almost bought a Land Rover for sure. Yeah, I went to this dealership to use cars, and there was an L3 for like $6,000, and I'm like, no way, I'm buying it tomorrow. And I talked to the guy, I think he's the manager of the dealership, and I was so excited. I was so stoked. I think he just saw my face, and I was sharing what we were planning to do with the vehicle. And he immediately goes, I don't think this is the right vehicle to take down to South America. I asked, but why? Parts are expensive, you know, there's a few issues, this and that. And I was bummed out, but he was the person who suggested that I went around asking mechanics what were the vehicles that they worked on the least. Obviously, you know, vehicles that have support or you can find parts for along the continent. So I did that. I went like this crazy person stopping randomly every time that I saw a mechanic shop. Hey, you know, I want to do this, or, you know, what are the vehicles that you see that, you know, the least, or like you work the least on? He said old Chevys and Land Cruisers and Toyotas. He didn't say Land Cruisers and Toyotas. I was like, oh, immediately what came to mind was, Land Cruiser.
And then you outfitted your vehicle. What were some of the things that you decided to accessorize with?
Slippery slope.
Truth.
Yes.
Especially taking off for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we'll talk about the build that you have now, which is quite different from the first build and how you guys decided what you were going to do with that, with all this experience that you had. But at the time,
the Overland scene was growing. It was being adopted quite a bit. More things started like popping up. Accessories. There were no bumpers, front or rear bumpers. There was options for upgrading your suspension from ARB, but not from any other manufacturers at the time.
For the 4Runner?
For the 4Runner.
Yeah.
The newer
4Runner.
5th gen.
Mm-hmm.
But because we took so long to actually be ready to leave, years went by and we have our vehicle and again, things are just like happening, right? Things are bubbling up and like accessories are coming out and like in the midst of it, and it's like we had jobs, and it was a little bit out of control.
Tasa's making a face right now.
It was like a constant Amazon Christmas in our house.
And special thanks to 303 Stable for supporting the Overland Journal podcast. Rock crawling, incredible views, and real people with a drive to leave the world better than they found it. It's all in a new documentary presented by 303 and Stable. From the ground up, Keeping the Desert Clean tells the story of an Arizona nonprofit tackling the massive problems of illegal dumping on public lands. Watch and learn how a hobby can turn into a movement, brought to you by brands driven to protect and preserve the things you love. From the ground up, Keeping the Desert Clean is available now on YouTube. Search 303 Products and subscribe today.
Definitely a lot of unnecessary things as well. I mean, I think that our bumpers and drawers and all these, I mean, there was a lot of money that went into it. It took time for us to understand that that's not necessarily the way to go.
Right. What were some of the first things that you got rid of immediately or like in the first few months?
Some of the modifications that we did to the vehicle were like, hard mounted bumpers with swing outs and like skid plates and all this stuff. I mean, that's kind of like a pain just to remove it. So that stayed. We had drawers that some of them I had to sell. While on our trip, we talked about this today in one of our presentations. It's super embarrassing, but like we took all of our scuba gear, including weights. It was a massive duffel bag with like BCDs, regulators,
so we overpacked.
Yeah.
Right, because you don't know what to expect.
No. You want to be ready for everything. So like we couldn't fit our paddle boards. We couldn't fit our water heater to take showers. I mean, a bunch of stuff. I was super frustrated.
Some of the main accessories, like some of the main things that we did keep and like were key was our rooftop tent. So that was a Magellina Auto Home, Magellina Extreme. That served us super well throughout our travels. And we had that a few years even before going on the long trip. And so that was key. And of course, we kept that.
Yeah, that's when we met you. In 2013, my brother from Italy came visit. And we went on this 3-week trip through the Canadian Rockies, BC, and Alberta. And we had been following each other. You guys were getting red. Rich and I got in touch as we were coming to BC. And we met you guys in Vancouver. Remember?
Yeah.
No, 2013. That was a long time ago.
And we also talked fridges at that time. And I, again, come from like a backpacking and hiking background. I was like, what? We don't need a fridge. A cooler's just fine. And I think you guys at that time hadn't decided on a fridge yet either. Game changer. The fridge was awesome.
Yes. Was this the shakedown trip kind of?
Absolutely. We thought it was. I mean, we still had a lot to learn, but yeah, it was very helpful.
So you said that it took you a long time to leave. Why was that? Life is complicated.
Yes.
So it's not easy to just leave everything right away, but
we wanted to pay the truck off. We didn't want to have payments on the vehicle. That was one of the reasons. The other one was I was in the process of getting my citizenship. So that also took a little bit of time. My family, as I mentioned, in Venezuela and in Italy. And I knew that we were going to be gone for a while, being used to go and visit them every year. So I felt that, maybe this time I brought him over to the US, spend like quality time for like a couple, 3 months. And then after that, I will feel better about, taking off.
And then we also had some things to pay off. And then we also really wanted to be able to save for the trip. So Absolutely. We had roommates and like we changed different parts of our lifestyle to really kind of fast track some of that saving, especially the last couple of years. Takes time.
What were some of the things that you did to fast track the savings?
I guess, again, the roommates, but also just, trying to eat out less. I mean, I didn't end up buying a second car, so I was taking the bus everywhere and we shared the vehicle.
Didn't really go out to have drinks. Like every weekend, it's pretty common, just go out for dinner and have drinks with the friends. And we stopped doing that because it stacks up.
We would have them over instead. Like we'd go, cook or go for a walk instead. Come out with us camping, things like that. And actually, we got quite a few friends to do that with us.
Eventually, you left. This is a pretty big lead up to the time that you left, and then now you're on the road. What were some of the maybe preconceived ideas or thoughts about how it was going to go and how it was going to be that changed when you got on the road? What did you expect? And then what was the reality? That's a clearer way of saying it.
Yes. Different things and different kind of subjects, I would say. So one of them was our friend Luis Getter, one of the OGs, as we call him, Luis and Lazy. We met them in person finally after following his travels for a while at one of the Overland rallies. And we had been doing a lot of camping for a couple of years, right? Like doing a lot of hiking and backpacking in our rooftop tent. And Luis basically made it clear that we were not going to be experiencing the same way as we were doing it in the States, and especially in the Pacific Northwest, where like you go out to a national park and a national forest and you have it all to yourself and it's all in the middle of like a beautiful forest. And, it's like you're going to be camping in dirty parking lots, but volunteer firefighter, compounds, don't think there's going to be like super rosy like you guys have it here. So I was like, oh wow, he was right.
Yeah. I was gonna say we camped at some interesting places, like an abandoned playground in Bolivia and gas stations and like places we wouldn't camp in Canada, but that's the reality of it when you get on the road, and that's something you don't necessarily see. So that was good advice.
Also, I was very wrong assuming that I was generalizing, making the generalization that Latin America probably wasn't as varied or diverse as I thought being from there. I thought the communications were going to be a little bit like more streamlined, the difference in accents or like the slang. Sometimes I couldn't understand whether they were saying. Like for me to finally grasp the day-to-day chats between people in Chile, that was hard.
And you're both fluent in Spanish, so it's really showing you how different the language can be based on where you are. It's like me from BC listening to like somebody from Newfoundland, in a way.
Another one I would say would be the anthropological side of it. It is incredible to learn and to experience, obviously, how different, like the cultural differences, people from city to city, but also there are so many still prevalent indigenous settlements and, all across the Americas. Culturally, that was fascinating.
How do you think being fluent in Spanish helped you understand the people in more depth? I guess it's hard because you are fluent in Spanish, so you don't really know the other side of it. But what were some maybe like deeper conversations or things that you learned because you were fluent in Spanish?
I think that there's maybe the trust factor happens faster. I don't think that it's 100% necessary to just speak the language. Like if you connect with someone, you connect with someone, right? But I think that it helped people open up faster to us, specifically to Ernesto, but to me as well. I think I met women that were curious about what I was cooking. Like that was always really special. And I'm thinking I'm making this like super basic stir fry, but for them, they're like, whoa, I've never done that to the pepper before, things like that. Or I met a woman when we were camping at our first gas station in Guatemala, but it was like gorgeous. It was, in the mountains in this coffee region. And we were making breakfast, my friend Liv and I, and she had some, I think, almond milk and I had some peanut butter or something, which is, not exactly common. She was observing with her little girl and we offered her some food, and she just started talking with me about my age and if I was going to have a family. And so I told her my age, and then she told me her age. And basically I thought she was like at least, 10 years older than me, but she was like 10 years younger than me. And she had just really been working the land for that many years. And so she was, sun-kissed and different resources than I have. These very intimate connections maybe wouldn't have happened if I didn't speak Spanish. Or maybe they would have, but I did feel like we had some intimacy more quickly and trust.
Absolutely. I think that it does help have those very intimate moments. Not with everybody, but like sometimes a lot of the stories that we share are stories that like really, they were very impactful and they were just like conversations or, or around dinner.
And a special thanks to Onyx Maps for supporting this week's podcast. For me, being prepared is all about having the right tools. One tool I use is the Onyx off-road map and navigation app on my phone. I use it to find trails and off-grid camping, and I use the fully functional GPS when I'm out of service. We all know that's usually where the best parts start. It's intuitive to use and lets me find open trails anywhere you want to explore with just the tap on the map. Access detailed trail information like difficulty ratings, duration, clearance level, open and close dates, trail photos, and more. Plus, there's color-coded public and private land boundaries, which are very helpful for when I want to try to find off-grid camping. And like I said before, I want to make sure that this sticks. It has offline maps. This feature allows me to access all interactive land and trail data and custom map markups when I'm out of cell service. Your phone's internal GPS will give you full navigation capabilities offline, so you always know where you are and how to get home safely. Use code Overland Journal today to save 20% off.
What was the moment or conversation that impacted you the most? Or were there a few?
There were a few. I mean, there were so many beautiful ones where like, things weren't necessarily bad. It's just like beautiful moments, like experiences that they had. But I think that some of those intimate conversations that stick with you, those that makes you reflect on how lucky we are, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so like the very, very essential and basic things that we have, like water and food, I think I didn't fully understand until I had a certain moment in the Guajira in Colombia, where it's very dry and it's very rural and they don't have that many resources. And like some people really do not have enough water and food. And we stopped to meet some kids and they were asking kind of for candy and money for kind of a toll to cross their land. And this is again in La Guajira in Colombia. And we just didn't understand what they needed. And we had given out like all of our candy and food and other stuff. And so we passed on some toilet paper to the mom. It was a mom and two kids. And then they were pointing at our water bottle. So I passed along my water bottle to maybe like the 2-year-old. And she just started gulping the entire thing. And her older brother, maybe who was 10, just was kind of giggling, I think out of nervousness because I think he needed some too. And so that was like, that hit me like a
hard,
super deeply.
Yes. Yeah, I think
never had a situation where I was thirsty like that.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And I think that depending on where we come from, we have these glasses that we see out of. And to take those glasses off is very powerful and enlightening. So yeah, thank you guys for sharing that experience. What were some of the most hilarious things that happened? Now that we're all crying here. No.
I think some of the, kind of like traumatic events.
Wait,
like,
hilarious.
Yeah, I know, but because they eventually are the funniest things to talk about. But like funny right away.
I have one.
Go for it.
Okay, so Ernesto, we were in Oaxaca, or actually in the town of Tule, where they have this beautiful tree, if you're ever there. And they had a local festival going on. And as part of those festivities, they had toritos, which are basically these like paper mache donkeys with like fireworks inside, and they place them on their heads, and then they dance around in the square, literally, and these fireworks are shooting off. In this particular celebration, they were like from the eldest folks of the community to the very youngest. And then at the end, they still had some left over and asked folks to come in from the crowd. Now, mind you, in the meantime, they're pouring mezcal to all the people in the town. They like had gathered money for months for this event, and then they just like pour you these mezcal shots. So Ernesto's like kind of saucy and all of a sudden jumps up to volunteer to do this torito, which basically means holding like fireworks on your head, dancing around to this like very like fun folklore Mexican music. It was kind of hilarious. I'm glad he didn't start a fire or anything like that.
I had a Baja, how do you call those?
Yeah, like one of those like Baja sweaters. Do you know what I'm talking about? He had just bought it right in town, and he started like Baja started getting sparking up as he was dancing around firework donkey.
I didn't really know how to do the whole thing. So I was just running around and getting really close to like the audience. And they were just like yelling at me, just like, go away. Like, like fireworks. I was just like shooting in all directions. And
he survived. So did everyone else.
How long, Dave, were you on the road for?
Exactly 3 years and 11 months.
Yeah, it's a long time. That's so amazing. And you ended up going back to Venezuela on that trip?
Yes.
Yeah. Was it both of you? Because I know that Thaisa went home for a little bit at the end. So you're both there. What was that like after driving this Pan-American highway for so many years and then coming back through where you met and where you were born?
Venezuela was tough because family and the current situation and what they have been going through. It made us realize they probably were struggling more than I thought they were. Here we were traveling. So that was hard.
Yeah. And I think people ask like, what's your favorite country? And of course we both love Venezuela and we would have loved to have really traveled it overland, but we did cross by foot from the Colombian border to spend time with Ernesto's family for a few months over the holidays. I guess after Venezuela, we had, a very special time with his family. It was very difficult at the same time. And then we still had months and many more countries to go. And in Colombia, right afterwards, we just kind of were processing everything. And it was really difficult. We really questioned if we should continue, if we should go back home to work, to support, to change our trajectory. But that's not what his family wanted. And we had planned for this trip for a long time, but it really was very difficult to enjoy it, as much as we were before. So,
right.
For example, like Colombia was difficult for us, even though Colombia is such a beautiful country. And so whatever you're going through emotionally is going to affect how you experience like the next place.
So true. Very, very true. So after these 3 years, you're wrapping up and you go back to the US. I've talked to a couple guests actually about this like transition zone and how it's hard to reintegrate. And I think we're always wanting to get back on the road when we go home. But talk about the importance of community in the Overland sphere and how important that is to you guys.
We have wonderful friends from work. Prior to the trip, we have built beautiful friendships with travelers like you and Richard for years. We were super close to you and many other travelers that we met along the way. The importance of that, the support of that community, especially when you get back, it's sort of like the support group that you need when you come back, and it's just like you're experiencing reverse culture shock in a way.
But it's even deeper than that, I think. I think it's like you come back changed and you hear all the things, because people said like, oh, it's so hard to come back. I was like, come on, how hard is it? Like you get a job, you suck it up. It was so hard because maybe not that much changed when you left. I mean, they did, but then they kind of didn't. And then you've changed so much and you're still understanding how profoundly you have changed and why and what your priorities are. And it's a lonely place. You feel kind of like an alien. Also, like I came back and I was like, oh, dang, I've aged. Of course I did. It was 4 years.
We all have. Yeah.
But there's so many things, and so many people come back to so many different things, right? Like you jump into a class, or you go back to your old job, or you're helping aging parents, or I don't know. There's so many things. So the transition, though, was definitely harder than we had expected. And so then the community, the overlanding community, like you guys, even just venting of how we're feeling was key.
Yeah, it's super important. And I think too, like putting your passion into something, you've put your passion into your next build, which right. I think it's so great to have the vision for the future and to be working towards that through a vehicle. We're going to wrap up soon, but I want you guys to talk a little bit about your Troopy, your Land Cruiser Troopy, and what you've learned about traveling that you've applied to this new vehicle.
Again, I'm just going to go a little bit back
yeah,
to like say
of course.
The whys, right?
Yes, thank you.
Our trip was extended for like months, quite a bit. So we planned to go on again in a year and a half and almost 4 years. We were so into it. It was clear to me that I wanted to continue to travel. And I started thinking, obviously, in a few things that we wanted to change. Being exposed to the elements is harsh. It hit me when we made it to Ushuaia, and then we had to start driving back, because for the first time, it felt like the beginning of the end, right? Now, for the first time, we're driving north and getting closer to home, which meant that, it's sort of significance. I didn't want the dream to die, sort of. What is the next thing?
Right.
So I have to put the next moving in motion, take the next step, put the next plan in motion. And that was like knowing that we wanted to get a new vehicle or to be a little bit more comfortable.
With inside living space.
I started inquiring in different places around the world, like Australia, Venezuela, Dubai, getting quotes. And so that kind of was the beginning of the new build, the new vehicle. We made it back to the US, and that was pretty much alive. I kept inquiring and investigating and doing a lot of research. We didn't have any money. Like, we were broke from the trip, but we had some credit available to us. And I knew that if we didn't make the move then, it was kind of going to die out. So I just basically went for it. I was like, okay, I found the vehicle in Dubai, got in touch with the dealership. Before I made it back to Seattle, on a whim, I bought a plane ticket to Dubai because I couldn't see how I was just going to be sending X amount of money to buy a car in a foreign vehicle without seeing it. Is that safe or whatever? It was a mad idea.
What's the make and model?
Toyota Land Cruiser 70 A Series. There I was. I had like plane tickets to go to Dubai. Round trip, $800. It wasn't that bad.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
For Dubai. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. The hotel was pretty cheap too, and it was actually really, really good. And I rented a Fiat Panda, like the cheapest thing that I could find to get me, be able to get around. Yeah, I got over there, and I really we both scrape every cent that we had to get this vehicle. There's something else. So I went to Venezuela and bought some older ones that I was gonna restore. So I don't know what I was doing. I was kind of desperate, trying to come up with this next plan that was gonna help us continue stay on the road and obviously get our own vehicle. So it really was like, I look back and I was like, what was I thinking? But somehow everything came together. Taking advantage of having dual citizenship, got the vehicle registered in Venezuela, shipped it to Mexico, drove it with my dad into the US. Started building it with the support of many companies, of course, and most of the work being done by me and friends that were very, very, very helpful.
So you did a pop top on there, right?
A pop top, the full build, the usual upgrades that you do to your vehicle, suspension, tires, bumpers, some lights and this stuff. But what was really key was definitely the pop top and the interior. I worked with a friend, the same friend that I went to college with, and was brokenhearted, made me take him out.
Oh my gosh, full circle.
Yeah.
And he designed was it the cabinetry system?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a joint effort between him, our friend Daniel, and I, bouncing ideas on how to solve certain problems with the cabinetry and all that stuff. It was very fun.
The build turned out absolutely stunning. So beautiful.
Thank you.
It's very clean. It's very classic. It gets a lot of attention here. I think there's a lot of FOMO on the street when you're driving by and people stop you and want to chat about it. And how did you get this here? And I want one so bad. So it's fun to watch. But yeah, it turned out really nice. What are your plans? Where are you going to take it? Do you know? We
built it with the idea of doing the same thing that we did in South America, which was to circumnavigate the continent and do that in Africa. So that's what we really wanted to do. Then COVID happened. Just had to wait and realign, priorities, also paying debt, saving. Right now, I think we're pretty ready. The vehicle is there's nothing else or not much else that we can do to it. We have this venture, which is restoring and bringing Troopies into the US. I think that hopefully we should be ready to ship sometime later this year. We have talked to our friends and put a tentative date for September 1st. Ship overseas, hopefully.
And we're still open to kind of where.
Awesome. I'm really excited to see what the next steps are for you guys. And I guess my final question, this is one that I ask almost everybody, I guess, but if you could travel to any country right now, what would it be and why?
I feel like you asked me that the other time, and I think it's still the same answer. It's Thailand. Especially recently, our friends Joe and Jose have been posting all of their fabulous photos of their journey in Thailand, and they were fellow Overlanders who did the Pan American, and I think they're kind of doing it more backpacking style, but in any shape, form, whatever manner, just the beauty of the beaches, and it looks like the culture and the food I'm just super drawn to. So I guess Thailand.
Nice.
That's a tough one, but I think that probably Iceland, New Zealand, Japan, India, go to the Himalayas.
That was great. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I so appreciate you sharing your experiences, knowledge, and stories with us. And if people want to find you online or learn more about your trip or the Troopies or your next adventure, where can they find you?
Our website is overlandtheamericas.com and Overland the Americas everywhere else in social media.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Ashley, at Overland Journal.
Thank you. And thank you so much to all the listeners out there for tuning in to another episode of the Overland Journal podcast. We appreciate your time, and we will see you next time.